Hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Hi-Fi Preschool and Kids Weekly Training Podcast. Thanks for joining us today. Today, I am joined by some of our crew from the Hi-Fi team, Rachel and Isaac, who you both know and love, and because these guys are some of our best experts on Hi-Fi Preschool and Kids. Rachel and Isaac, thanks so much for joining us today.
Glad to be here.
So excited to be here.
All right, so listeners, if you're tuning into this particular podcast, you will notice something a little different than what is normally on our podcast, and that is this podcast episode is just for preschool. So you guys might be thinking, what are we doing this month? Why is this different? In the month of July, we are breaking up our episodes into preschool-specific episodes and kids-specific episodes because we are covering some different content. In Hi-Fi, the I am statements in kids for July is I am broken. In Hi-Fi Preschool this month, we are talking about how God cares when I hurt. And so this is a little bit different of a truth that we're talking about. A lot of times in preschool, we have really exuberant, exciting, simple truths that we talk about, right? God gives me friends. God knows me. And so this one is a little bit different because we're talking about something that's a little bit more somber. In the kids space, we are going over the truth, I am broken. And so for preschool, we felt like it would be really important as we talk about just the hurt and sad and broken things in our world, that we really help preschoolers understand this foundation that God cares when I hurt. So that is why we have two different episodes for the month of July. And so if you're a preschool leader, we are so grateful that you have joined in. If you're a preschool and kids leader, you'll definitely want to check out the kids podcast episode as well to find out what is happening over in the kids space this month. So Isaac and Rachel, thanks so much for being here. As always, we want to start off with a fun, silly question because, you know, this conversation is actually going to be kind of challenging and kind of more of a somber conversation more than just fun, exuberant, happy. And so, but before we get there, it's also, I think, really important to think about, like, we can talk about hurt things without experiencing the hurt emotion in it. So when is a time, maybe it's a silly time or a funny time or just a random time, that maybe you hurt yourself, that you care to share with the world at large and to care to share with our listeners? Have you ever hurt yourself before? If so, how did you hurt yourself? What happened? How'd it go?
I can think of many times when I've hurt myself in silly ways because I am a klutz. My whole family knows I'm a klutz. I fall all the time or like hit myself on weird things. But the time that comes to mind is I dropped a water bottle on my toe one time. Like just, you know, like the water bottle you carry around with water in it. And it broke my toe.
Oh, no.
And so it was the weirdest thing. It was just like, I had to go to urgent care because it also cut it. And they were like, oh my gosh, what did you do? And I was like, I just dropped a water bottle. That was all that happened. So silliest reason ever.
My goodness. Wow. Well, listeners, hold on tight to your water bottles. Don't let them hurt your toes.
They're dangerous.
Wow. Who knew? Isaac, what about you?
So on my 30th birthday, I woke up and I was going to like sneak out. My wife, who I thought was still asleep, I was going to like sneak out, go make some breakfast. And I stood up and I had like both my knees popped, my lower back popped, I sounded like bubble wrap. Just being
welcome
destroyed.
to 30.
So I stood up and it's just like these loud audible pops. And all of a sudden I just hear my wife, who I thought was asleep, just giggling. And she just goes, happy 30th birthday. And has been downhill since then.
Oh my goodness. That's great. Yeah. Welcome to 30. My goodness. That is amazing. That's so funny. I can remember a time when I was a kid and, you know, back when it was a different time when we played at the park in my generation than playing in the park today. But do you guys remember those like jungle gyms that like were the big domes and they were all in like triangles, and you climb up and you swing from them.
Oh,
Anyone
yeah.
else do that?
Geodesic dome. Yeah, we have one in our backyard.
Yeah. So I climbed up on that thing. I am also a klutz, Rachel, so I completely identify with what you're saying. And I climbed up and I went to swing off and I fell and I actually broke my arm.
Oh, no.
Because of that.
Oh, no.
Like it had like some kind of fracture and I had to have a cast and whatnot. But yeah, I was like, of all things, like it happened. So it's the thing. So, we all get hurt one time or another. And oftentimes when we think about hurt, especially for preschoolers, this is what they think about, right? They think about physical hurt. But what we are going to be talking about this month is how God cares when we hurt. Now, that includes physical hurt, but it also talks about emotional hurt. And so with preschool and with kids, we're really trying to address and help kids and preschoolers understand the idea of the brokenness that is in our world, right? And so we have hurt things, we have sad things, we have people who hurt our feelings, we fall down and scrape our knee, and it hurts when we scrape our knee. And all of these things that hurt are because we live in a broken world. These weren't originally part of God's design for creation, but we experience them now because as we learn in Genesis of the toil that happens and the curse of the fall that we now have. And so there's all of these hurt things that we experience because of sin. And so with preschoolers, we're helping them work through and kind of talk about what it looks like of when I hurt, God cares, right? It's not an if I hurt, because we know we are all going to experience hurt in one way or another. And preschoolers understand this, even at a very young age, that there's things that hurt us. There's things that hurt our feelings. There's things that hurt us physically. And when that happens, it's important for us to help preschoolers understand that God cares about those things. And when we feel alone, or when we feel afraid, or when we feel sad, or even angry, that God knows what we're feeling and He cares about how we're feeling. Now, that doesn't justify some of our feelings if they are sinful, right? And that lead to sinful actions. But God caring about us is universal. Like He cares about the things that we're feeling whenever those things are happening. And so this month, we're really going to be talking with preschoolers about how in those different emotions that we feel, which we will feel at some point or another because of our brokenness, because of our sin nature and the world that we live in, we're going to feel alone. We're going to feel afraid. We're going to feel sad. We're going to get angry. And when those things happen, God cares about us and He's with us. So that's just a little bit of an overview of why we're leaning into how God cares when I hurt. And we're going to be doing this through the theme ups and downs, which is kind of like a little roller coaster, which is really fun and exciting and just a sweet thing to do in the month of July. It's going to be so fun. And I really love this because we're able to talk about emotions and the hurt things that we feel in a way that is not scary. And that's something that our themes really help us with. They help us have approachable side-by-side conversations that are age appropriate and also are able to talk about even some potentially hard stuff in a way that's not scary and fearful. And so through our theme of ups and downs, our preschoolers are going to learn how God cares about us in every situation and all the things that we feel because of the brokenness of our world and the brokenness inside of us. And yet He doesn't leave us that way, right? He doesn't leave us to continue to just feel broken all the time, but He provides the hope that we need through Jesus. So Isaac, help us kind of talk through a little bit what we can expect with this month with Hi-Fi Preschool and the different Bible stories that we're doing for preschool versus what is going to happen over in the kids space. Why did we decide that? Why are we doing it this way? And what can our leaders expect this month?
For sure. Well, as Kayla said, we really want to deliver this message of God cares when I hurt in an age-appropriate way. With kids, we are looking at I am broken as part of the 3 circles conversation when we look at sin and how we were separated from God because of our brokenness. And we still want to make that clear for preschoolers, but we want to make it clear in a way that they can understand at their age. So when we talk to preschoolers and we talk to them about how God cares when I hurt, like Kayla said, the ups and downs of the roller coaster, preschoolers, they have ups and downs every single day. Sometimes preschoolers have ups and downs every single minute. And you might even experience that on a Sunday morning. I'm sure you have. But when these preschoolers feel these things of feeling alone, of feeling afraid, of feeling sad, of feeling mad, we can tell them, hey, God cares when you have these ups and down feelings. And kids, we're going to be looking at these different things of how God cares when I feel alone, afraid, sad, and mad through the Psalms. But we didn't want to quite go that direction with preschoolers because those we wanted to give them some of those practical core stories that preschoolers need to make that connection. So over the 4 weeks with God Cares When I Feel Alone, we're going to look at how God was with Daniel. When we look at how God cares when I feel afraid, we're going to look at the story of how God cared for Elijah. When we look at how God cares when I feel sad, we're going to see how God heard Hannah's prayer. And lastly, sometimes we feel mad, and we're going to see how God healed Naaman. And I think these are going to be such great connections of how God cared for these people. But every single day in our ups and downs, when we feel brokenhearted, when we feel like we have these feelings that no one else has ever felt before, we know that God cares for us through those feelings and that He loves us. And that I'm very excited to be able to teach that to preschoolers over the next 4 weeks.
Thanks, Isaac. Yeah, I love how these stories are such good concrete examples of people who have experienced these things, or, are in situations that we can assume that we would have experienced those same kind of feelings. And so they're just great concrete examples for preschoolers versus a more abstract take that we're taking with kids with the Book of Psalms. So we're really excited about these Bible stories. I am especially excited, you guys, about the Bible story with how God healed Naaman and how God cares when I'm mad. Mostly because that's not something we talk about a lot of time, about when we're angry and when we're mad and what to do about it. And so I'm really excited and I'm really looking forward to the opportunity of teaching preschoolers about what it looks like that I am going to feel mad sometimes. That may not be right. And yet God still sees and cares about me when I feel that way. It doesn't mean that He condones my anger or the sin that may come from it. But that also doesn't mean He's ignorant to the fact that I'm feeling this way. And so I really encourage you guys to always check out all of these podcasts because I think they're really helpful, but especially the last one this month on how God cares when we feel mad, I think will be really insightful. So
and just wait for that super clue. It's a fun super clue that week.
It's a fun one. We'll leave you guys in suspense. All right. Well, Rachel, with that, can you kind of walk us through this week? So this week we're talking about how God cares when I feel alone. Kind of unpack this week for us. Help us think through, okay, we're preparing for Sunday. What are the big things we need to be aware of or think about as we're praying and preparing to teach preschoolers this week?
Yeah. So this week, as we talk about how God cares when we feel alone, we're looking at Daniel 6. We get to talk about Daniel in the lion's den. And I think it's really important to remember that one of the things we value for High Five Preschool is that it's its own set of lessons and content, that we're not taking what kids does and just making it more simple for preschoolers, but we're creating it from the ground up. And that went into part of this decision to have a different Bible story and to focus on Daniel 6, because Daniel 6 is a really clear, tangible way that preschoolers can understand that God cares when we're alone. In Daniel 6, the king passed a law that you could only pray to him for 30 days, we know that Daniel continued to pray to God. And because of that, Daniel was thrown into the lion's den. And as we read Daniel 6, it doesn't give us insight into how Daniel felt when he was in the lion's den. It doesn't say, in the lion's den, Daniel was lonely or Daniel was afraid or scared. But we can think about how we would feel if we were in that situation. And we know that we would feel alone. I know I would feel alone. But what's so neat is that while Daniel was there, God cared for him. He sent an angel. The angel shut the mouths of the lions, and that Daniel was safe. My favorite part of the story is after that night, the king comes and Daniel says, I'm here, and he's safe. And because God cared for Daniel, God protected Daniel, even when Daniel felt alone, and he was alone. But we can see that because of God's care, the king even says, we're going to pray to God. We're going to pray to the one true God. And it shows us that God does care when we feel alone, and God is with us when we feel alone. And that is something our preschoolers understand. They have times they feel alone and confused. And what a great truth to remind them that they are loved and cared for by God and that He's with them.
Listeners, you are not going to want to miss this week. It's going to be such a sweet and powerful way to really help our preschoolers know and understand that God really is with them. He really does care about what they're going through and about what they're feeling. Even though those feelings are temporary, they're not going to last forever. They're not always going to feel alone or any of those things. In all of our ups and downs and every single thing that we go through, God is with us and He cares about us. And I think this is going to be such a great opportunity for preschoolers to learn and understand who God is and His character. So in those moments when they do feel sad, when they do feel alone, when they do feel scared, they can remember this is what's true about God. He cares about me. He's with me. He loves me. And that's such a great truth for all of us to remember. So listeners, thank you so much for tuning in this week. Please join us again next week as we talk about how God cares when I feel afraid. So we're going to be looking at the story of Elijah in 1 Kings 19 and talking and unpacking a little bit more about fear, which we know is something that's very real that preschoolers experience on a regular basis. So thank you so much for tuning in. We can't wait to talk to you next time.